Nice to finally talk to you. I've seen much of you. I think you've seen a fair bit of our magazine. I've seen you very kindly read out some of our tweets and articles before.
Yeah,
But
I have we not done an interview before? I feel like we've corresponded in the past.
I think it's been discussed. I think it's never come to fruition. I know you feel like someone I've met, but I don't think we've ever actually met. I think I've
I'm
just seen enough
almost
of your
certain.
videos.
I
And
don't
you've
know.
just read enough.
I can't remember. I cannot remember right now, but I am almost certain. Hold on, let me fix this camera angle a little bit.
I'm sorry if I've forgotten our
Yeah, you're a busy
memorable
guy.
previous.
You're too busy being right all the time with your early calls on John Fetterman.
Oh, that guy, that asshole. Did you see his? I'm just writing an article tonight about his former chief of staff, Gentleson,
Oh
who's
yeah.
just started this think tank. And I don't know if you looked at the first paper their think tank put out was on climate change. And it said, how can Democrats talk better about climate change? And their recommendation is stop talking about climate change.
Well, I think the Democratic Party really needs to drop more issues. If they just become more like Republicans, obviously, eventually one of these elections, like they'll trick the Republicans into voting for them, and then they can just be Republicans.
You say that sarcastically, Hasan Piker, or you sound like you're saying it sarcastically.
No,
but,
no, I'm actually
that-
dropping my career as a successful podcaster to become a Democrat Party analyst.
That genuinely seems to be the approach of this think tank, of there's the Abundance Institute now, and they seem to have converged on these ideas. Now, let me just introduce you for people for people like my parents who don't know who you are. I mean, most people will probably. Hasan Piker is one of the most popular political streamers in the world. He is about to hit, I think probably within a month or two, 3 million followers on Twitch. He has done interviews before with people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, friend of the magazine Abdul El Sayed. You may have seen his op-ed in the New York Times recently. I was supposed to debate Charlie Kirk. Here's what I would have said. You may also have seen his speech at the People's Conference for Palestine, or you may have seen, he's also the guy that journalists go to when they want to answer the question, how do we speak to the young men? And so you may have seen his profile in GQ. Hasan Piker thinks America might be cooked. Hasan Piker, they have some weird titles, these. Hasan Piker, a progressive mind in a MAGA body in the New York Times, and Hasan Piker, himbo gateway drug for progressives, NPR. How do you feel about the various monikers that have been applied to you?
Fantastic. What's really interesting about it is that the media will come to me in the aftermath of elections for an autopsy, and then they just like avoid listening to anything I have to say.
But I feel like the things that you do say, I hear you go on like Pod Save America, and they go, Hasan Piker, tell us why we lost, and you go, well, it's because you're not speaking to the things that normal people want out of their politicians.
Yeah. And then they immediately go, yeah, that's not it. And we saw a version of that with Zohran too, because like I'm eternally grateful for Zohran Mamdani, not because he too is a 34-year-old Muslim socialist, but also because every single thing that I said leading up to the election about all of the issues that the Democrats were facing in terms of like their inability to address these material harms that people were experiencing, cost of living crisis, and their willingness to compromise on a lot of these issues instead of like fighting and instead of like developing a sophisticated counter messaging operation around like immigration and numerous other problems that the Republicans were highlighting. That all came to be the reality. That was the reason why Kamala Harris lost, right? Which, if you ask Kamala Harris, she has 107 different reasons apparently. But at the time, in the aftermath of the election, they were like, okay, you said a lot of these things. Many of them came true. What do you think is the problem with like, the young men becoming MAGA? And I kept repeating these things over and over again to people, but now it's much easier, so I can just like point to Zohran and be like, well, there's a guy who's doing it. Like that's proof. That's like proof of concept right there. And yet I have noticed that the media overall still very much refuse to reckon with that, and will still say, oh no, it's because he's handsome. or he does good social media. And then they try to redo the Zohran thing, but for like centrist politicians, and it's just going to be a demonstrable failure.
Yes, you see, actually, a lot of them directly imitating Mamdani's video style, but without the policies, seeing if you can run that. As you say, it is a kind of proof of concept because, we talked to Mamdani pretty early on when he was, considered to have absolutely no chance. And I said to him, how are you going to, as a democratic socialist, appeal to New Yorkers? And he said, relentless he said the same thing he told every single person who asked, relentless focus on affordability. And then if you ask the people who supported him, they will not say, I supported him because of his nice smile. They say, like, I can't afford to live in this city.
Well, don't you know those people don't know what's good for them? They only voted for him because of his nice smile, actually. It's because Andrew Cuomo had a bad smile. That's why he lost.
Well, and people say the same thing about you, Hasan. They say people there was all these profiles I noticed in the thing. They were like, well, he has. I think was it the New York Times profile that was all like, well, people like a handsome man.
That's yeah.
And I was like, well, that's true. But I was watching your speech at the Palestine conference, and one of the things I was struck by there was that you were giving the audience there, your message was like relentless, like life is difficult, this is hard, but we have to keep pushing, we have to hope.
It's easy to feel powerless in the face of such tremendous cruelty. I totally understand how some people want to tap out every now and then. But you must never succumb to nihilism. You must always maintain revolutionary optimism. You must always continue to organize. You must always continue to agitate. Because the quicker we can create enough insurmountable pressure that causes the American state to recalculate its double suicide pact with Israel, the quicker we can save as many Palestinian lives as possible. We do it for those who have been martyred, and we do it for those who still remain.
If I was going to watch you for a long time, it would in part be because of that giving of meaning and hope. And I'm sure you think that that's a big part of why you've managed to attract, so many people.
I think so too, because there's a lot of hotties out there, like a lot better looking than myself, I would say. And I don't think many people are tuning in for their political opinions with regular frequency. So I do suspect it might have something to do with the content. But I take it with grace. It's not terrible. My haters and my lovers alike, when they write these profiles, they'll talk about my looks, and I guess that is a part of it. Having said that, I think the way that I see it, I look at a lot of these media hits as terrorism insurance. I jokingly call it, terrorism and anti-Semitism insurance, because not a secret that the ADL has been after me for the past 2 years now. And viciously smearing me and trying to actively deplatform me for my anti-Zionist, my committed anti-Zionist stance. And I think a lot of these articles are written by like-minded reporters, like-minded journalists that can make their way through the editorial censors without actually pointing to the policies or the ideals that I represent, but simply still saying we see it. It's almost like a nod. It's almost like we want to give this guy some positive coverage, but we can't do it over the contents of what he's talking about. So we'll just talk about it from an entry point that is more liberal facing. So it's good. It's ultimately great. I'd much rather have the New York Times write about me in that way than the million other Fox News articles that come out every other week about how I'm somehow responsible for 9/11 or whatever they've cooked up.
I mean, you said terrorism insurance. People who are not familiar, might think that was rather extreme. But we just talked to yesterday members of the Gaza, the Samud flotilla, who were talking about how, their peaceful flotilla, Israel has escalated its description of them as they've gone from talking about them as the selfie cruise to talking talking about them as a terrorist flotilla.
As you know, most of my background, my social background in my life are Zionists. And for the first couple of weeks, I was getting lots of texts of, "Oh, I hope you're enjoying your cruise with Greta on the selfie boat." And, those texts have died down recently because I think they see that the Hasbara has changed. Now it's now we're the terror boat, and they're not sure what to say to me anymore because they know I'm not a terrorist.
And we know that the United States and Israel have both been pushing the boundaries consistently of, Trump's strike on the Venezuelan boat, just trying to figure out how much violence they can get away with without being punished for it. So, I mean, your op-ed in the New York Times was about the American culture of violence around Charlie Kirk. You get a lot of death threats. I mean, it's fun. These profiles make it seem fun, but we're living in very frightening times.
Yeah. I mean, there's two different forms that I'm worried about. You got the decentralized adventurists that have a false sense of vengeance, that might want to take matters in their own hands, which is always an imminent threat. But then you also have the government prosecution, no matter how illegal it may seem right now, given the First Amendment. It's very obvious that the administration is taking the initiative. And I mean, the executive order that came down yesterday that designated Antifa as a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization, which has never happened before, not for the Klan, not for the Three Percenters, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, or any other group in this country that is far right and much more organized. But instead, this vague definition of Antifa, which is simply an action. It's not an organized unit whatsoever. It's just an action that people take against fascism. And I suspect that they are going to be very aggressive in their pursuit of combating any sort of political dissent and eroding the First Amendment, as they started under the Biden administration and certainly continue along in the Trump administration with pro-Palestinian activists on college campuses.
Well, and what we saw during the recent Kimmel thing was how easily private corporations can be intimidated by the government into deplatforming people just with a phone call or a word. I know, you stream on Twitch. You've had suspensions before. I was struck by. Am I right that you got a suspension for reading a terrorist manifesto while denouncing it? Was that it?
Yeah.
Was that?
So I have read manifestos of all the shooters and acts of domestic terror in general, because a big part of what I do is to try to combat the misinformation environment that is immediately built in the aftermath of high-profile incidents like this, whether it be a school shooting or a mass shooting. And I think one of the best ways to arrive at the ideological profile of a shooter or a domestic terrorist or any sort of suspect whatsoever and understand their motivations is by looking at their manifestos. And in the past, I've never been punished for this, but it is a terms of service violation technically. That is a part of their TOS. I don't agree with it, but it's a part of their terms of service regardless. But the first time it was ever used against me was in the aftermath of the Israeli embassy staffers that were shot, and I went through the manifesto that Ken Klippenstein had actually released to get a better understanding of what the motivations were here, and that was the first time I got a suspension for doing that, even though I'd read many profiles and many manifestos in the past.
And I'm trying to think how to approach this delicately and carefully, but it is true that when you read the words of those people who are official enemies, without agreeing with or even sympathizing with their acts, whether it be October 7th, whether it be reading the words of Osama bin Laden, it is true that when you read their explanations for their actions, it at the very least humanizes them. And that is dangerous to the ideology that says we just have to exterminate them. We had, Osama bin Laden's letter to America went viral on TikTok a couple of years ago. And the reason it did, I don't think because people concluded that Osama bin Laden was right to carry out terrorism, but because he explained his grievance against the United States, and it was rooted in U.S. foreign policy and not a hatred of our freedoms. Dropsite News has been publishing a lot of interviews with Hamas, and when you listen to the people from Hamas, they certainly seem human. They seem, again, not to justify, just to reiterate, not to justify the October 7th attack, but certainly to say that America's enemies are human beings as well, and that is a dangerous idea.
Yeah, it's not only that, but also I think the media environment of omitting any sort of like rationale behind like designated state enemies is the reason why when people do actually find out about whatever the rationale was behind Osama bin Laden, for example, to go, oh my God, I can't believe this person was just like this. This person also had a logical through line between his opinion and the actions that he committed, no matter how heinous, no matter how atrocious they may be. And I think it's important to understand that, especially if the goal here is to end violence in general, even if it's retaliatory violence. And I think the censorship structure designed around this is done so in a way to, I guess, I don't know if it's a sincere effort to stop the potential humanization of like a shooter or a bad actor or anything like that, but more so I think it's done to correspond to State Department interests. And obviously, not these things are not always the same. And in most circumstances, I think it's up to us as adults to assess through it, to parse through those words and to explain what the rationale is, and then talk about why it's silly or ridiculous, especially when compared to the heinous acts of violence that are committed. This is what you described with Hamas's rationale, for example, is a perfect demonstration of this censorship regime. Because a big part of the reason why most Americans are completely oblivious to the many years of Palestinian liberation struggle is a direct consequence of this, where there's no time spent on those who take up arms against the Israeli violence that has been committed against Palestinians for almost 100 years at this point, and certainly officially for the past 80. And because of that, they will go along with the official narrative, which is they are anti-Semitic animals, they're barbarians, they're monsters, and they just wanted to behead Jewish babies or something. And they're just like, they have deep anti-Semitic genes in them, as Joe Biden once famously said. This is untrue. This is completely untrue. And I think that a lot of people are fearful of making the might is right argument openly in liberal society, because it doesn't correspond to the way that liberals have presented themselves, the way that liberals have identified themselves as like peace-loving people that are interested in human rights and whatnot. And therefore, the easiest way to deal with that is to simply shut off the communications of the other side that needs to be in a permanent state of perfect victimhood. And even then, we still don't listen to their plight.
And for saying things like this, Hasan, you had at one point, about a year ago, I think, a Democratic member of Congress, Richie Torres, who wrote to the chief executive of Twitch, your platform, and said, "You're platforming an anti-Semite. You need to purge anti-Semitism from your platform. You need to take his living away and make sure that nobody hears what." Even though as I understand it, every single time you have ever mentioned anti-Semitism, you have explicitly denounced anti-Semitism.
I've been someone who has combated anti-Semitism for my entire professional media career, and also have been a committed anti-Zionist that entire time as well. But I think that is the reason why I am seen as like a more prominent critic, a more dangerous critic in the eyes of like the ADL or the Israel's very own attack dog, Richie Torres, for that reason, because obviously someone like Nick Fuentes is incapable of changing the hearts and minds of young American Jews, who will obviously listen to what he has to say, hear that he denies the Holocaust, recognize that he's a fascist, and go, oh, this person hates Israel because he's anti-Semitic. In many ways, someone like Nick Fuentes being a prominent critic of Israel is actually quite appealing to the interests of Zionism in this country, because you can always present critics of Israel as anti-Semitic and then point to guys like him. But when you point to someone like myself, who has actively fought back against anti-Semitism and also argues against Israel and argues against Zionism from an empathetic point of view, empathetic to the plight and the struggle of the Palestinian population as an anti-fascist, all of a sudden that's a lot more complicated. Liberals are obviously a lot more open-minded to the way I argue about this issue, because it's a more honest. It's a more honest assessment of the situation.
There's a paragraph I just want to read from the New York Times profile of you, because I think it is a fascinating exercise in the manufacturing consent of the way things are portrayed. Mr. Piker is similarly unfiltered with his viewpoints. Some can be extreme. Okay, the word extreme there, note. A vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, Mr. Piker has been labeled anti-American by people across the political spectrum for saying the country, quote, deserved the September 11th attack. No context there. And has been labeled, who? We don't know. His recent accusations that Israel is committing, quote, genocide in Gaza, which, of course, afterwards was found by the United Nations to be true, and his diatribes against the Zionist movement have led many supporters of Israel, including liberals like Representative Richie Torres, to call Mr. Piker anti-Semitic. And then, in quotes you, I find anti-Semitism to be completely unacceptable. But, you know, let's present both sides of that. So I feel like just within that paragraph, there were about 10 different fascinating framing choices.
Well, what's really interesting about that is that you also brought up the fact that I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times after Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. And in that op-ed, which of course went through many editorial controls, which was a very interesting process in and of itself. But in that op-ed, the accusatory tone I take towards Israel's genocide is now actually hyperlinked to yet another New York Times op-ed written by a prominent Jewish Israeli scholar of the Holocaust, if I'm not mistaken, or a genocide scholar, who also said Israel is committing a genocide. So now, at this stage, as you know, time passes and it becomes more as mainstream publications, even ones who have been primarily invested in defending Israel and laundering Israel's reputation, such as the New York Times, has opened itself up to the idea that maybe Israel is committing a genocide, and they do let you write that in the newspaper now. So I guess that's a sign of progress in some ways, even though the amount of death and destruction that it took for the paper of record to get there is incalculable.
Hi, sorry to interrupt, but if you like this video, please subscribe to this channel for more wonderful current affairs material in the future, and head to currentaffairs.org/subscribe to subscribe to our beautiful print magazine today.
We read an article about a month ago called "The Left is Always Right Too Early," and making the argument that as leftists, one of the serious frustrations that you have, whether it was the Iraq War, which is what I grew up, but protesting, the same happened with Vietnam. The same you now see in Gaza, where there's a consensus of human rights groups, and you could even print it at the New York Times, as you say, that it's a genocide. But for a long time, in fact, even calling for a ceasefire, that the sort of things, very, very mild things in October, November, December 2023.
Green Jean-Pierre and the Biden administration said it was gross to even bring such a thing up, if I recall correctly.
Well, there have been some members of Congress who have called for a ceasefire, and they have not gone as far as backing the administration's call for support for Israel.
So look, I've seen some of those statements this weekend, and we're going to continue to be very clear. We believe they're wrong. We believe they're repugnant, and we believe they're disgraceful.
They said something like that. Ceasefire is it's a gross word to bring up right now. How dare you?
Yeah. I mean, don't you find that one of the frustrations of being on the left is finding people come around to agree with you when it's too late?
Yeah, but I don't really. I mean, look, I've been doing this for quite a long time, as you have as well. And one of the things that I've realized is that ultimately it's not about "I told you so's." And anyone that comes and joins the battle on the right side, no matter how late, as long as they recognize the error in their ways and actually critically examine how they arrived at the wrong positions early on, I'm perfectly open to having them on my side. But having said that, one thing that I have noticed in my experience is that a lot of people actually forget what you have said, but they do remember how you made them feel. And I think, at least in my experience, I've seen a lot of people, instead of go through the motions of recognizing that Israel is committing a genocide, they don't actually end up going, you know what? Actually, you were right. I'm so sorry that I called you a terrorist. Maybe I was being a little Islamophobic there, calling a prominent Muslim critic of Israel a terrorist and an anti-Semite, despite the fact that he had, has been pretty clear on his opinions, constantly separating Judaism from Zionism. And they just kind of find different ways of saying, well, you were still wrong, actually. One version of this that I saw was, I think it was Matty Iglesias who said that, not to me in particular, but it was just so hilarious that he was like, well, it was obvious what Israel was doing was wrong, but it's just that the left was so annoying about it that it took a long time for us to get there. And it's like, no, dude, you're a piece of shit, first and foremost. Yeah. And secondly, you look like an egg. Why do you look like that? Fix it, please. And last but not least, I mean, he's professionally wrong for on everything throughout his entire career. And it has nothing to do with how people made you feel. Like, this is a real issue of consequence. This is a real significant issue. There's like babies being charred on live streams every goddamn day. And you're like, you're going to let a bunch of campus freshmen piss you off to a degree that you're going to shut yourself off from the truth? It's ridiculous.
Well, yes, not only professionally wrong, but what was striking to me, because I did a big article about that guy a few months back called Matt Iglesias is confidently wrong about everything. And then his only rebuttal was, actually, it's not everything. There were and he listed like 3 things he was right about. But one of the striking things to me was how little he knows about Israel-Palestine. Like, he literally does not know what is actually going on. And there was just an interview today with Cass Sunstein, in the New Yorker. He's, I think, the most cited legal scholar in the country, or close to.
I love that.
He was a friend of Henry Kissinger. Isaac Chotiner is a great interviewer. Asked him about this. And he said, well, I don't really know anything about Kissinger's foreign policy, but he was really nice about my book on Star Wars. And what was striking to me was not just how, morally indifferent to the fate of the people of Vietnam and Cambodia he is, but he didn't even seem to know anything. He seems so stupid.
That's a lie. Nathan, that's a lie. And it's a lie in the case of Egg Boy Matty Iglesias, and it's a lie in the case of the legal scholar married to Samantha fucking Powers. It's a lie. They know. They just don't want to admit it because it feels like ignorance in that moment is seen as like a shield. Matty Iglesias, if I'm not mistaken, wrote extensively about the horrifying nature of the apartheid when he visited Israel a very long time ago. I have to go back to the archives here and try to figure this out, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that he actually saw it with his own 2 eyes, and even had that wake up moment, I believe, where he talked about the apartheid and many years prior to numerous sieges that had taken place. I think these guys know what they're doing. I think that they understand that. I think everybody understands that Henry Kissinger is the most appropriate vector of American imperialism that everyone universally can yell about, even though he's not all that different in the grand scheme of things from, Anthony Blinken or numerous other State Department heads, including Marco Rubio and everyone else pretty much has the same amount of blood on their hands as Henry Kissinger did. But he was an appropriate vector for anger for liberals for a very long time. And I believe that it's more so just a reputation laundering to act as though you don't know his crimes, just so you can continue being friends with this person who in your mind is a very powerful individual.
I want to ask you about moving forward, because I'm sure it occurs to you as it occurs to me. You know, you've built this enormous following of people. You've been very successful in many ways, but I'm sure you find it very frustrating how actually quite powerless you are against the horrors of our time. I mean, you can speak and you can be listened to, but we've seen, you know, we started Current Affairs in 2015, 2016. We were warning that Trump was going to get elected if they didn't nominate Bernie. They didn't nominate Bernie. Trump got elected. Then we were warning that Biden would be a terrible president. Then he was a terrible president. We said that Trump would come back because Biden would be so terrible. Then that's exactly what happened. And then they didn't learn anything in 2024. And now they're talking about Kamala Harris coming back in 2028, or Pete Buttigieg, or whatever. And it does feel like the left, you know, you have these kind of moral victories. We have built a kind of left. We have a devoted following at our magazine. But building power is another thing. But when I listened to your speech to the People's Conference, it was very hopeful. It was very determined. So why?
I mean, it's always darkest before the dawn, right? I feel like after a decade of advocacy for the Palestinian plight and the Palestinian emancipatory movement, I have seen things. I've seen tremendous amounts of pain, but I've also seen so much progress in terms of broad awareness in the Western world. Obviously, if you live in the global South, you're pretty aware of what was going on with Israel and Palestine. But the Western nations and their populations have been able to parse through the incredibly sophisticated influence peddling operation that Israel has designed for quite a while, with no restrictions and no setbacks. And I think that has led people to get very angry. That's led people into taking action, taking to the streets. It has led to at least some conciliatory moves from states, even if they offer a symbolic victory, I guess, in an effort to build an off-ramp, or to offer a pressure valve to the growing demands being made by the public, like the state recognition of Palestine, the conditional state recognition of Palestine. But that is a sign of progress, I think. It's understandable to feel discouraged when you see things like that. But when judging where we're at now, as opposed to where we were 10 years ago, it's impossible not to feel hopeful. And I feel like, I guess a part of the reason why I always do feel hopeful is because, like, I have more faith in my neighbors and in the people that I know, like regular people that are simply working and not super tuned into what's going on than others do. And that hope is revitalized every time I attend a protest or a rally and see the expression of solidarity for people thousands of miles away, and for our neighbors from very different walks of life and very different backgrounds. You know, when people are protesting against ICE deportations happening in their neighborhoods, that reminds me that we do have the numbers, and that it gives me hope that there is discontent out there, and people are willing to put their body in harm's way in an effort to make the government meet their demands and hear them out.
Public opinion has certainly shifted pretty radically on Israel, Palestine. You now have candidates, Democratic candidates, like Abdul El-Sayed, who you've interviewed, and Graham Plattner in Maine, who are openly running on as a point of pride, rejecting AIPAC money. AIPAC, for so long, the last thing you could do was offend AIPAC. And now there are people who really see the shift in public opinion and understand that the space has opened up to tell the truth. And I feel like we're seeing, in some ways, as I said, we were founded in 2015, so right at the beginning of the Bernie moment, and Bernie's losses were very crushing, but I see kind of like, I don't know, the seeds that Bernie planted, the next generation of candidates coming up. I mean, in many ways, like, you and I are like products of that. There was like Occupy Wall Street, there was Bernie campaign, and then there's like this generation of young progressives who are rising up. And then I see, you know, Kat Abou-Ghazaleh's campaign in Illinois, and I'm like, okay, something is brewing here.
Absolutely. I think if the Democrats won't do their very best to save this country, then I hope that the socialists will drag them kicking and screaming. It's going to take time. And I think that human life is finite, and it's very short. Our lifespans are very short, so we have a very narrow perception of change. We only see it within our lifetime, and we have no capacity to envision a future and how long and how much effort it takes to build even the foundation for a better tomorrow. And I always try to remind myself that the best possible thing you can do is put your best foot forward, you know, and keep trucking, and no matter how many hurdles are thrown in your direction. And I try to remind people to do the same, because as long as your cause is just, and as long as you are working tirelessly to ensure a better future for the next generation, and you take steps to materially improve your immediate circumstances, your life, through organizing, through solidarity, through joining different organizations, through engaging in activism, direct action, mutual aid, and the like, you will develop a better future for yourself. And you will also experience the same solidarity that I was talking about, and experience the same hope that I see.
You know, we are fortunate to live in a time when we can look around and see people who are deeply inspiring, right? There are, of course, the journalists risking their lives every day in Gaza. You recently interviewed at the DSA convention Rashida Tlaib, who is someone who is, faced just horrific threats and racism as the only Palestinian American member of Congress, and who kicks ass. She's so cool, and she's so humane and just full of like life and determination. And you know, you see people like that, and it can help you move forward.
I think for people like Rashida Tlaib, there's no other option. She's forced into this position. She doesn't have the same privileges that you know, like a white Christian person would have in a country like the United States. Like, she has to advocate for her own humanity every day, and her existence in that regard is almost a form of resistance as well. So I'm glad that we do have some advocates in Congress, and I hope that we have even more advocates in Congress and in also positions of power as well. I'm not so nihilistic when it comes to exhausting every avenue of power, and using everyone that no matter how much they're worried about maintaining the same hierarchies, using anyone and everyone that I can to our advantage to build a movement. So I don't shy away from participating in electoral politics in that regard as well.
What do you think about the question of how much you should be willing to compromise? For someone like AOC, who's been deeply inspiring to me, who you've talked to as well, you know, she's come under immense criticism for perceived accommodation with the Democratic Party leadership. Bernie Sanders, the same. Zohran Mamdani, was pressured to renounce his statement calling the NYPD racist, and he agreed to apologize for that. I kind of think that he shouldn't have done that, because I don't think they give you much credit for doing things like that. But I also understand the pressures that come under. How do you think about this question of, pragmatism when you see people really going after one of these politicians for supposedly, selling out?
You shouldn't be led by fear. I think that if you know your cause is just, you shouldn't shy away from assuming the role of leadership. And what you've described with like AOC are missteps, in my opinion. I think that, or at least that's the way I read it. They're not, and with Zohran Mamdani especially, I think Zohran Mamdani has a long-standing commitment to American foreign policy, or a long-standing critique of American foreign policy that is a lot more fully flushed out than I would say AOC's foreign policy commitments look like at her in her first campaign as opposed to where she's at now. So I see that as a wrong move, like the kind of pragmatic approach. Some people, I think, have a more cynical, or some people assume a more cynical intention behind that sort of thing, where they think like, oh, they're getting completely captured by the Democratic Party, and they won't actually reflect radical change that is an absolute necessity right now. Having said that, only time will tell with respect to AOC and also with Zohran as well. I'm not so certain. I hope I'm right. I hope they don't actually become corporate Democrats with like who have marginally better politics in terms of like moving this country in the direction of social democracy or something. But then again, I've been hurt by Bernie Sanders' inability to call what Israel is doing a genocide until after the UN decision. So
yeah,
who knows?
He's definitely not led on this, right? I mean, declining to endorse a ceasefire early on, he's really had to be pushed at every stage. And AOC had to be pushed. I mean, they chased her around a movie theater trying to get her to say genocide. And it's like...
Yeah, that was interesting, though, because like AOC has been more confusing for me because in many instances, she has been a lot more bold on the floor of Congress, calling what Israel's doing an ethnic cleansing campaign very early on. But then also simultaneously making decisions against Marjorie Taylor Greene's like messaging provision that she added, no offensive versus defensive weapons going to Israel. And I think that distinction is important. And I said at the time, like AOC should be the leading voice on this in Congress. She should be the one making these provisions on bills and not letting Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a silly person in general, outflank her on this issue on Israel. I guess my point is, I want my politicians, I want politicians on the left to be way more on the fuck Israel tip than they have been so far. I think that is not an area that you will be punished for, no matter how fearful you are of corporate donors and no matter how fearful you are of lobbying interests. Like the people will back you, as we have seen with the primary victory for Zohran. I think a lot of Americans are very frustrated with Israel. And there is an expanded permission structure that many Democrats who are supposed to be on the right side of history on this issue, or at least they have been, they're too afraid to lead on this issue. And I'm endlessly frustrated by it because it's not pragmatic. It's actually the opposite of pragmatism. I think it's silly to not lead on this immensely popular position that will single-handedly communicate your earnesty to as broad an audience as possible.
Well, it's like how not endorsing universal healthcare is portrayed as the pragmatic position, but actually that's a disaster. You need to give people something. Yes. You need to fix their problems. I mean, now that all of the mainstream human rights organizations have said this is genocide, the United Nations has released this report. Americans are actually, despite our reputation for violence, fairly humane. They don't like genocide. So taking the I think genocide is bad position, I really think is the electorally and morally sensible position to take. Listen, to conclude here, I want to ask you, we had our kind of inspiring little look at we discussed determination, we discussed organizing, we discussed moving forward with boldness and courage. But I want to return to the dark side, which is the forces that we're up against. I mean, you every day imbibe a lot of horrible news, and you more than anyone, you understand the gravity of what it is we are facing in this country, which if people have tuned out, if they don't like picking up the newspaper because it's full of horrible news, they might not grasp, just how pivotal, just the stakes of this historical moment. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit, the path that we are on if we don't succeed.
There's tremendous hardship ahead, and there's already tremendous hardship for many working class Americans right now. The cost of living crisis has not been addressed at all. And there's a genocide going on, obviously. There are numerous conflicts taking place. America is losing its grip on power as the hegemonic superpower, the world police that was unconditionally the leading nation, the leader of the free world or whatever. And I think that as we move into this multipolar world, the nation has, or our leadership has, two different options. Either they try to quietly cede ground on the global stage to China and other great powers, or they harden their positions and become increasingly more belligerent, increasingly more militant, and demand tithing from our vassal states. I think it's not a secret that Donald Trump has chosen the second option there. And while doing so, unlike even the initial attempts by the Nazis, when they were seizing control and seizing power, there's been no improvement, at least in the short term, for the economic circumstances of the base. And therefore, I guess that's somewhat of a positive situation, because like as long as there's still economic discontent, it does feel like this is not an organized fascist movement that can completely destroy what remains of the American guardrails on theoretical democracy. But they're going to keep trying, as they have. I think that it's very obvious that this administration has a serious distaste for the First Amendment, for free speech, and they started punishing opponents of Israel, critics of Israel, because I think that was the easiest that was the easiest avenue to start this project with Project Esther under Project 2025, very clearly communicating the steps that they will take, using immigrant enforcement as a primary vehicle to deal with people, to create a chilling effect on speech, with the likes of Mahmoud Khalil and numerous others. But because they're so disorganized, and because they're so incompetent, and because they're so worried about hiring people that have the utmost loyalty to Donald Trump, but are also belligerent and incompetent people themselves, they've kind of failed on a lot of these initiatives. But that doesn't mean they're not going to keep trying. The designation of anti-fascism as a terrorist organization, and the numerous attempts to even utilize the FCC to try and silence critics of the president, no matter how silly their criticisms may seem, no matter how timid their discontent may look like. These are clear-cut attempts to silence dissent and to cripple organizing in this country, and to destroy what remains of any sort of pushback that could exist against a growing fascist wave. So we'll see where that goes, but I don't think that the liberals are aware of the dangers, or at least the party apparatus is aware of the dangers, or they just don't care. It seems like they're in full appeasement mode. They're obeying in advance, and corporations are obviously, as they have done so historically, also towing the line and moving along with the Trump administration, responding to the demands that they're making to sanitize culture, or at least move culture in the direction of a rightward shift. Not exactly certain how well that will go for them, but all that spells for the immediate American future is more censorship and more punitive measures for expressing any sort of anger or resentment towards anything that's ostensibly on the right. And so we just have to organize, and we just have to keep showing up to the best of our ability, and hope that this administration recognizes their unpopularity and cave, as they have done so already. But we can't rely on corporations, and we can't rely on the Democratic Party.
My hope is that Zohran Mamdani will become the socialist mayor of New York. He'll do a fantastic job, and everyone will realize that they want to be governed by democratic socialists.
That's the real fear. That is definitely a real fear that the Democrats and the Republicans both have. It's very obvious. But I think that I think that he has a lot of hurdles, whether it be the real estate developers, whether it be Wall Street, or perhaps more consequentially than both, the militant police force that is a standing army in New York.
Well, Hasan Piker, we really appreciate the work that you do. They say that you are the one person saving the young men from the clutches of Nick Fuentes or whatever. But I think, just generally, you speak, you give people every day, a sensible left analysis on the news. You show, you break through the bullshit, and you do it for a very long time. If people aren't familiar, I still cannot believe the amount of hours that you do this. And you were criticized at one point for saying how soul-sucking full-time streaming can be. But I think you're totally right. I could not do your job. You do like about, is it 8, 9, 10 hours?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Well, there's a lot of work to be done. And, someone's got to do it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, is nowhere near as awful as like working a construction job is. I have every opportunity to stop what I'm doing and go work there if I wanted to.
Yes, but people don't watch you all day and comment in real time on your performance. The job.
Yeah. No, it is definitely frustrating. It definitely melts your social battery for sure. That's what I was saying, as opposed to like other jobs that I've had.
And wait to clip any flub or slip up
and they do.
Send to the government.
And they do. They do.
You're walking a tightrope out there, my friend. Well, yeah. So thank you so much, Hasan Piker, for coming on Current Affairs to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
So you're used to hearing me tell you to subscribe to the print edition of Current Affairs, and you should subscribe to the print edition of Current Affairs. But today I want to talk to you about someone else you should support, because there are friends over at the Majority Report. I find it really, really hard to find intelligent, informed commentary on the news. There's so much bullshit in the world. And we've gotten to know and become friends with the Majority Report because we just really respect the work that they do over there. Sam and Emma and the staff there do fantastic research. They know what they're talking about. They focus on important topics. I've been on their show, and, at a time when so many supposedly independent media outlets are compromised by outside interests, they're not. We're not, and so we stick together. Majority Report is really a beacon of genuine free thought. So we are delighted to partner with them. Their kind of outlet is really rare and special and needs to be supported. And so they've agreed to give our readers a deal on memberships there, and we're giving their listeners, in exchange, a deal on Current Affairs subscription. So they are offering, Majority Report with Sam Cedar, offering discount rate for membership there to all Current Affairs readers, $5 a month for 6 months, and you can use the code Current Affairs at checkout. And so your membership there keeps the Majority Report possible. It'll give you access to their daily fun half, to all bonus content, commercial free, 5 days a week. First access to discounted live show tickets, first access to limited run merch. So if you join with that special discounted rate, you can support the Majority Report with Sam Cedar. They are unbought and unbossed. And as I say, just personally, we really like them. We really respect them. And it's been great to get to work with them. So support Current Affairs, read Current Affairs, but also support all independent left media. And Majority Report is a great example of that.